Mincemeat pies or mince pies, or pies with a filling of some combination of fruit and spices, are a popular Christmas-time delicacy in the United Kingdom. But while we've adopted many English Christmas-time traditions, you won't find many Americans gobbling down mince pies this time of year.
Pie? Not for me, no.
So why don't most Americans eat mincemeat pies? Well, let's start with the fact that we used to. Mincemeat pies are centuries old, originating in England. Popular during Yuletide celebrations, English settlers brought their traditions of eating mincemeat pies during Christmas with them to the Americas. Or at least some of them did. Puritan colonists in New England followed strict, shall we say, no fun rules. Disdainful of the number of Catholic saint days, and believing that one day a week devoted to rest and religious reflection was plenty, Puritans largely abstained from Christmas festivities. This included feasting.
Merry Christmas!
I'm a Puritan. I don't celebrate Christmas. In fact, I've had it banned.
So strong was their contempt of Christmas frivolity that many sources state that New England Puritans outlawed mincemeat pies altogether. But this specific mince pie ban may actually be a myth, possibly started by Samuel Peters, who wrote A General History of Connecticut. First published in London in 1781, Peters made note of a number of Puritan blue laws, or laws prohibiting certain activities, sometimes on specific days like Sunday, and typically for religious reasons. Among the alleged blue laws was, quote, "No one shall make mince pies." But Peters isn't exactly the most reliable source. He was a British loyalist during the American Revolution and was driven out of Connecticut for criticizing the Boston Tea Party. Peters fled to England and soothed his wounded pride by writing a largely false and possibly satirical narrative about the history of his former New England home. Thus, many of the blue laws Peters noted in his History of Connecticut are likely more fiction than fact. But yet, the mythology around Puritans and mince pies persisted and has become part of their lore. So much so that Puritans would come up once more when mincemeat pies faced their next challenger, indigestion. From the mid-1800s to early 1900s, mincemeat had a reputation for making people sick. Specifically, mincemeat was believed to cause indigestion. Others accused mince pies of causing its eaters to be lazy or have bad complexions. Several schools, particularly women's colleges, limited or banned mince pies from their menus for making students, quote, languid. Writer Sarah Josepha Hale would have approved. She lamented in her 1839 book, The Good Housekeeper, that the custom of eating mince pies at Christmas was too firmly rooted for the Pilgrim Fathers to abolish it. I may be allowed to hope that during the remainder of the year, this rich, expensive, and exceedingly unhealthy diet will be used very sparingly by all who wish to enjoy sound sleep or pleasant dreams. Sleep and dreams lead us to another side effect of mince pies. Perhaps not unrelated to indigestion, mincemeat was also thought to give you nightmares. A saying went, "The mince pie season is at hand, and the nightmare will soon gallop through the land." A more catchy poem read, "My love lies screaming in her bed. The reason is, I have a hunch, nightmares are romping round her head. She ate mince pie for midnight lunch." In 1886, American humor magazine Puck published an article by Scott Way that called mince pie the most reliable nightmare hatcher that is made to tempt the palate of poor weak man. One plain, innocent-looking mince pie will furnish a large family with more than enough nightmares to go around 3 or 4 times. During World War I, a New York woman even allegedly sued a local pie manufacturer, claiming that a mince pie had given her a terrible nightmare in which she witnessed the German army capturing the French city of Paris. She asked for a mere $10,000 for her emotional damages. It's not clear from newspaper reports from the time if the lawsuit moved forward, or even if it was real to begin with. But nonetheless, the story made its way into papers across the country, likely fueling American beliefs that nothing good came from eating a mince pie before bedtime. But indigestion and nightmares didn't seem to stop people from eating what was called an American national dish. And by that time, it was easier than ever to make a mincemeat pie for the holidays. Some of the biggest names of the preserved foods industry, like Libby's, Armour, and Heinz, all offered their own versions of pre-made mincemeat, along with many other companies. Though of course some people continued to make their own mincemeats. Mince pies were so prevalent during the holidays that Jay Nickerson of the New York Times noted in 1948 that Thanksgiving starts off what might be called the mince pie season. So I guess you could say mince pie was the pumpkin spice of its time. And well into the 1980s, its proponents proclaimed that it simply wasn't Christmas without a mincemeat pie. But today, you won't find many Americans complaining about the absence of mincemeat at their holiday table. So, what happened to mince pie? It may come down to reputation and branding. First, reputation. Mincemeat pies in their earliest form were largely comprised of, you guessed it, meat. But over the centuries, mincemeat's recipe evolved to include suet, or animal fat, alcohol, dried fruits, spices, and sugar. The meat in mincemeat could encompass a whole range of options, but by the 1800s, recipes in the US typically called for ox tongue and/or beef, in addition to suet. But as pre-made mincemeat became available, it became apparent that not all manufacturers were playing by the same rules. Some mincemeat makers used less desirable ingredients like wormy fruit, or omitted key components altogether. There were even reports of mincemeat made without the meat.
Where's the beef?
Others included harmful ingredients like wood chips. No wonder mincemeat was thought to give you indigestion and nightmares. Things got so bad that in 1911, the U.S. Pure Food Board, a predecessor of the Food and Drug Administration, felt compelled to create a formal definition of what mincemeat was. They defined it as a mixture of not less than 10% of cooked, comminuted meats, with chopped suet, apple, and other fruit, salt and spices, and with sugar, syrup, or molasses, and with or without vinegar, fresh, concentrated, or fermented fruit juices, or spirituous liquors. But despite regulations, mincemeat's reputation as being made with mystery meat persisted. This reputation also ties into branding. Most modern mincemeat pies or mince pies actually contain no meat. They are made with fruit, sugar, spices, and sometimes alcohol. And in some recipes, the suet has also been replaced with other fats, like butter or vegetable shortening. But because the name mincemeat seems to imply the inclusion of meat, they are confusing from a branding perspective. And expressions like, "I'll make mincemeat out of you," don't exactly help.
You fools. Away, for I make mincemeat out of you.
Lastly, by the 1990s, mincemeat pies were described as outdated in the US. They were the kind of thing that your grandmother or great-grandmother might have made, but have been largely replaced by pumpkin, pecan, and apple pie. And other recipes that might use mincemeat like Christmas pudding or fruitcake have met a similar fate. Some people still make them, but they're not as prevalent during the holidays in the US as they once were. Once the centerpiece of American Thanksgiving or Christmas desserts, mince pies have fallen into obscurity. As demand declined, so has pre-made mincemeats. Libby's, Heinz, and many other companies have discontinued their mincemeat lines. One of the last major holdouts, J.M. Smucker's, discontinued its None Such mincemeat around 2023. The brand name was brought back to life in 2024 by a new company, None Such Foods LLC, but remains hard to find on store shelves. And as pre-made mincemeat became harder to find in stores, it became harder and harder for consumers to make mince pies during the holidays. And so it becomes a cycle. The harder it is to get mincemeat, the harder it becomes to make mince pie, and the less likely consumers are to make or try them, unless they want to make mincemeat from scratch. Though I'll note that you can probably still get mince pies from a bakery. My local Publix had a stack of them, which a bakery employee told me are only available during the Christmas season. Out of curiosity, I asked my community how familiar they are with mince or mincemeat pies. The majority of people who responded said that they had heard of mince or mincemeat pies, but had never tried them. 18% had heard of and tried them, and 7% had never heard of mincemeat or mince pies before. Personally, I really like miniature mince pies. I tried them for the first time last year and have since added them to my Christmas dinner. Have you had mince pies? What do you think of them? What are other traditional American holiday foods that have been lost to history? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel below. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.